My name is Sarah Mitchell, and today I want to share my story with you. I'm a single mother who lost everything in a house fire. No insurance, no help. I was completely broken, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But after praying to God every night, something I never expected happened. One day, an anonymous millionaire stepped in. He paid for everything, and he even gave me a new job. This is how my life changed, when I thought it was all over. It started like any other night. I'd just gotten home from the late shift at the diner, exhausted but grateful to have made enough in tips to cover groceries for the next few days. My daughter, Lila, was already asleep on the couch, still in her school uniform, her little body curled up like a kitten. I carried her to bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "We're gonna be okay. Mommy's trying." I didn't know that just a few hours later, everything I owned, everything I'd worked my whole life for, would be gone. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up choking. At first I thought I was having a nightmare. The air felt thick and wrong, and my throat burned. That's when I noticed the strange glow under the bedroom door, an unnatural orange light flickering like something alive. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of wood splintering, of flames roaring. I flung the covers off and bolted upright, panic rising like a wave. Lila. Her name escaped my lips before my feet hit the floor. I didn't have time to think. I ran into her room barefoot, my legs trembling, smoke already curling around the ceiling like ghostly fingers. She was still sleeping, unaware that our world was on fire. I yanked her into my arms, shielding her face against my chest. The hallway was an inferno. I couldn't see, I could barely breathe, but I ran. I screamed for help, but the only reply was the crackling roar of the fire swallowing my home room by room. I don't even remember opening the door. I just remember the cold night air slamming into us like a slap to the face as we burst outside. We stood in the middle of the street, barefoot in our pajamas, watching the only home we'd ever known burn to the ground. Neighbors watched too, from behind windows, from porches, but no one came out. No one said a word. Sirens howled in the distance, too late to save anything. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the curb, holding Lila tightly as she sobbed into my shoulder. The fire department arrived, but all they could do was make sure the flames didn't spread. A Red Cross worker handed me a blanket, a plastic bag with bottled water and toothpaste, and a card for emergency housing, a shelter I knew was already full. I nodded like I heard her, but all I could hear was silence in my own head. A numbness. A stillness. A void. By sunrise, there was nothing left. The house was a shell. My photo albums, Lila's toys, my mother's Bible, all gone. I stood there in ashes, and no one offered to help. No family to call. My parents had passed years ago. No husband, he left when Lila was 2. No savings, no insurance. Just me, a 7-year-old girl, and a 2002 Toyota Corolla with a broken heater. We slept in that car the first night, parked in a dimly lit gas station lot. I tried to act brave, telling Lila stories and singing lullabies to calm her shaking body. But the truth is, I broke. When she finally fell asleep, I leaned against the steering wheel, staring into the blackness outside the windshield, and whispered, "God, if you're real, if you can hear me, please, I don't know what to do. Please don't let this be the end." I didn't expect an answer, but I would soon learn that sometimes when everything you know burns to the ground, that's exactly when heaven starts to build. The first few nights in the car were a blur, cold, quiet, and terrifying. I parked behind grocery stores or in 24-hour gas station lots, wherever felt the safest. I cracked the windows just enough for air, but not enough to feel exposed. Lila, still too young to understand the full weight of what we'd lost, would fall asleep curled up beside me in the passenger seat, her little hands clutching a stuffed rabbit we salvaged from the trunk. I didn't sleep much. My eyes stayed fixed on the rearview mirror, scanning every shadow, every figure passing by. I was her only shield now. And I was terrified I wasn't strong enough. The days blurred together. I washed my face in gas station bathrooms, brushing my teeth with water from a plastic cup. I'd try to make it look like a game for Lila, like we were on an adventure. But even she started to notice the routine, the way we never went home. The way her clothes stayed crumpled in a bag on the back seat, the way my smile kept getting thinner. I called shelters. Full. I called old coworkers. No answer. I even stood in line at a church pantry for the first time in my life. trying to act invisible while people passed out canned food like mercy. One day, I swallowed my pride and stood outside a gas station with a card sign that simply read, "Anything helps." Lost everything in a fire. People passed by. Some offered change. Most didn't even make eye contact. I used what I gathered to buy a sandwich and split it with Lila. She got the bigger half. I remember one moment like it's tattooed on my soul. It was raining. Cold, angry rain. Layla had a cough that wouldn't go away, and I had just been told by the last shelter in the city that there was no room for us, not even on the floor. I sat in the car that night, soaked, shaking, exhausted beyond words. Lila was asleep in the back seat, her tiny frame rising and falling under a blanket that didn't do much to keep the chill out. And that was the moment I broke. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, my breath caught in my throat, and then I screamed. I screamed like I never had in my life. I screamed for the unfairness, for the fire, for the silence from everyone I thought might care, for the fact that I was trying so hard and still falling deeper into the pit. And then I cried. Ugly, messy sobs that left me gasping for air. I slammed my fist against the dashboard and whispered through clenched teeth, "God, where are you? I don't need riches. I don't need comfort. I just need a way out. I need hope. Please. I am begging you. Don't let my little girl grow up thinking this is all life has to offer." And then, silence. Just the rain tapping on the windshield, and the wheeze of my daughter's breathing in the back. But something in me shifted that night. I had nothing left. No pride, no plans, no backup. All I had was that prayer. A raw, desperate cry from a woman at her absolute lowest. I didn't know it yet, but that prayer, uttered in the dead of night, in a broken-down car by a woman with nothing left to lose, was about to be answered in a way I never saw coming. The next morning, something was different. The rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but calm. Like the world had taken a breath. I woke up stiff and sore in the front seat, my neck aching from sleeping upright. Lila was still asleep in the back, curled into a ball under the thin blanket. I reached into the glove compartment for a few napkins to wipe my face and tried to gather enough courage to face another day of getting by. I didn't know where we'd go. I didn't know what to try next. I was tired in a way I didn't know how to describe, not just physically, but spiritually, like something inside me had dimmed. Then I saw it, a plain white envelope tucked neatly under the driver's side wiper blade. No markings, no logo, no return address. Just there. My heart skipped. For a second I thought maybe it was a parking citation. But we were parked legally, and no officer would leave something like that so delicately placed. My hands shook a little as I opened the car door and reached for it. It was dry, sealed, slightly thick. I tore the flap open. What I saw inside made my breath catch. Cash. Stacks of crisp $100 bills, 50 of them, maybe more. I froze, blinked, counted again. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a joke. This was $5,000 in cold, hard reality. My vision blurred. My fingers trembled as I reached deeper into the envelope and found a folded slip of paper, small, square, torn from a notepad. It said only one thing: God hasn't forgotten you. No signature, no name, no contact, just those 5 words scrawled in neat, steady handwriting. I looked around, suddenly aware of how quiet the world was. There was no one nearby, no shadow watching from a distance, no car pulling away, just a still parking lot and a whisper in my soul that felt holy. I sat back down in the driver's seat, clutching the envelope to my chest like it might vanish. And then, for the first time in weeks, I broke, but not from pain. From awe, from wonder, from the sudden, overwhelming realization that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this. That someone had seen me. That someone, somehow had heard that desperate prayer I'd whispered into the dark only hours before. I kept whispering the words over and over. God hasn't forgotten you. I didn't know who left it. I didn't know why they chose me. But in that moment, I didn't care. Because for the first time since the fire, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Hope. It had been 2 days since the envelope. I hadn't touched the money yet. Some part of me was afraid it wasn't real. Like if I spent even $1, it would all disappear and I'd wake up back in that freezing car. But I allowed myself one thing. A moment of peace. I used $20 for gas and drove Lila to a nearby park, a quiet one by the edge of the city where hardly anyone went. She deserved to stretch her legs, to play, to feel normal again. As she ran toward the swings with a rare, genuine smile on her face, I sat down on a sun-warmed bench and closed my eyes for the first time in what felt like weeks. That's when I felt someone sit down beside me. I opened my eyes, startled. A man, mid-40s, clean-shaven, in a tailored gray coat, sat at the far end of the bench. He wasn't like the others in this park. He looked like he belonged somewhere with marble floors and boardrooms, not cracked sidewalks and graffiti-tagged picnic tables. He didn't say anything at first, just sat quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on Lila as she giggled in the distance. Then he turned to me and said, "She has your eyes." I didn't know how to respond. I smiled politely, the way you do when a stranger speaks but you're unsure of their intentions. I expected him to get up, walk away, maybe hand out a religious pamphlet and disappear. But he stayed. "You look like someone with a story," he said. "Mind if I ask what it is?" At first, I hesitated. I didn't owe this man anything, but something about him felt safe. Not in a sweet, sugar-coated way, in a knows what rock bottom feels like kind of way. And for reasons I still don't understand, I opened up. I told him everything: the fire, the car, the shelters, the prayer, the envelope. Every word poured out of me like water breaking through a dam. He didn't interrupt, didn't give pity eyes. He just listened, nodding now and then like he understood all the invisible weight behind every sentence. When I finished, I laughed nervously. "Sorry, I don't usually talk to strangers in parks." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek white business card. No title, just a name, a phone number, and a small embossed emblem I didn't recognize. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, with a calm certainty that sent chills down my spine, "Your life's about to change." And just like that, he stood up, nodded once, and walked away. I sat there frozen, the card resting in my lap, my fingers trembling. I looked around to see where he went, but by the time I turned back, he was gone. Vanished into the crowd, into the trees, into thin air. Like he'd never been there at all. But the card was real. And something deep inside me whispered that this wasn't a coincidence. This man, this stranger in a gray coat on a worn-down bench, wasn't just a passerby. He was sent. I waited 3 days before calling the number on the card. Not because I forgot, but because I was afraid. Afraid it was too good to be true. Afraid that the moment I dialed, the illusion would shatter. But on the third night, as Lila slept, curled up in the back seat and a winter wind howled outside the car windows, I looked at that plain, white card again. The name was embossed in silver. No company, no tagline, just a number. My fingers trembled as I dialed. He answered on the second ring. Same calm voice, same quiet strength. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said, as if we'd known each other far longer than one brief encounter on a park bench. He asked if I could meet him for coffee. Not at some high-rise office or gated mansion. Just a small, tucked-away cafe on the edge of the city. The kind of place where no one wore suits and everyone looked like they had a story. When I walked in, he was already there, seated at a corner table, with 2 cups of coffee and a file folder resting beside him. He stood when I arrived, like a gentleman from another era, and gestured for me to sit. "You don't know me," he began, "but I know you. I know where you are, because I've been there." And then he told me his story. 10 years ago, he was living under a bridge. Addicted, broken, forgotten. He'd lost everything: his job, his family, his will to live. One night, on the edge of ending it all, a stranger handed him a sandwich, looked him in the eyes and said, "You're still worth saving." That moment rewired something in him. He checked himself into rehab the next day. Within 5 years, he had built a tech company from scratch. Now, he was a millionaire. Not just wealthy, but transformed. And every year since, he had made it a mission to help one person who reminded him of who he used to be. This year, that person was me. Then he slid the file folder across the table. Inside were plans, blueprints, paperwork, photos of what used to be my house and what could be a modest, beautiful rebuild, fully furnished, fully paid for. "I want to rebuild your home," he said. "Give your daughter a room to feel safe in. Give you a fresh start." I stared at him, stunned. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. It felt like I was watching someone else's life. But then he added, gently but firmly, "There's one condition." I braced myself. "There's always a catch, right?" He leaned forward, voice low and certain. When you're back on your feet, when you've healed, when you've rebuilt, I want you to find someone who's drowning like you were. And I want you to throw them a rope. Not money, not charity, hope, a hand, a reason to believe again. Promise me that, and everything here is yours. Tears welled in my eyes, not from the offer itself, but from the way he saw me, not as a victim, not as a charity case, but as someone capable of rising, of one day becoming someone else's miracle. I nodded, unable to speak. My hands shook as I gripped the folder. And in that moment, surrounded by the soft hum of a corner cafe, I realized something. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was grace in human form. And it had just given me a second chance. The sound of hammers and drills was like music to me. It echoed down the block, rhythmic, steady, full of purpose. I stood across the street most mornings, coffee in hand, watching strangers rebuild what I thought I had lost forever. Framing went up first, then the roof, then windows. Each piece of wood nailed into place felt like another brick being lifted off my chest. My house, our house, was coming back to life. But in truth, it wasn't just a building going up again, it was me. While construction crews worked, the man, he asked me to call him Daniel, set us up in a temporary apartment. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a palace. A warm bed, a working shower, a kitchen stocked with food. It had been so long since I felt safe that I almost didn't trust it. I kept waiting for the phone call saying it was a mistake, for someone to knock and tell us we had to leave. But that call never came. Lila started school again. New clothes, a backpack with her favorite cartoon characters, brand new pencils and notebooks, things I couldn't have given her in 100 years. On her first day, she turned to me and said, "Mommy, does this mean we're not poor anymore?" I didn't know what to say, so I hugged her tight and whispered, "It means we're starting over." When she disappeared through the school doors, I sat in the car and cried. Not from sadness, from relief, from guilt, from gratitude, all tangled into one impossible knot. Daniel checked in often but never hovered. Every time I tried to thank him, he'd wave it off and say, "This isn't about repayment, it's about restoration." I didn't always understand what he meant, but I felt it. Deep down, he was rebuilding more than walls and floors. He was rebuilding my faith, in people, in grace, in something higher. And yet, part of me still wondered, why me? There were thousands of single mothers, thousands of stories like mine, many worse. Why did God choose me to be seen, to be rescued? Was it pure chance, or was I some sort of lesson? Some cosmic example? I wrestled with that question at night, staring at the ceiling of our small apartment while Lila slept peacefully beside me. But then I'd remember the fire, the cold, the ache of total loss, and I'd remember that envelope, that card, that moment on the park bench, all of it layered like brushstrokes in a painting I hadn't yet stepped far enough back to understand. Maybe I didn't need to know why. Maybe the miracle wasn't in being chosen, but in being willing to believe it was possible. So, every morning, I got up. I dressed Lila for school. I walked past the job site with my head a little higher. I washed dishes with gratitude. I folded laundry like it was a privilege. I prayed, quiet, shaky prayers that said only "thank you, I'm still here." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I meant it. The sky was clear and blue the morning Daniel handed me the keys. No clouds, no wind, just the kind of calm, golden sunlight that makes you feel like the world is finally breathing with you instead of against you. We stood in front of the house, my house, rebuilt from ashes, from grace, from something far bigger than I could explain. The door was fresh white. The porch had flower pots. The windows were spotless and wide open, letting in light like it belonged there. I held the keys in my hand and stared at them as if they might disappear, like a dream I was afraid to wake from. "Go on," Daniel said softly. "Open it." I stepped forward, turned the key, and pushed open the door. The scent of fresh paint and polished floors hit me, but underneath it all was something deeper, a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. The living room was simple, beautiful, a cozy couch, shelves, a photo frame already filled with a picture of Lila from school. The kitchen sparkled. The bedrooms had curtains. Lila's room had a canopy bed and a tiny bookshelf filled with stories waiting to be read. I walked through each room like I was touching a memory before it was made. And then, somewhere between the hallway and the kitchen, I broke down. I collapsed to the floor and cried. Not the silent kind, not the pull-it-together kind. I cried from a place so deep, so raw, it felt like years of pain and survival were pouring out at once. Daniel let me cry. He stood quietly, not intruding, not offering empty words. When I finally looked up, he was kneeling next to me, holding out a folded piece of paper. "This," he said, "is the next step." I opened it. It was a job offer, official letterhead and all. A full-time position at his nonprofit, helping women who'd lost everything just like I had. Women who'd been homeless, who'd fled violence, who'd seen their lives crumble beneath them and were still trying to stand. My job would be to help them navigate housing, childcare, job placement, hope. Real hope, not charity, not pity. A hand up, a path forward. "We don't hire people who've had it easy," Daniel said. "We hire people who've lived it, who survived it. You are the mission." That's when I cried harder than I did the day of the fire. Because this wasn't just a job. It was a calling, a purpose, a chance to turn all my pain into something that could heal someone else. I was no longer just someone who had been helped. I was becoming someone who helps. I looked at him through tears and asked, "Why me?" Daniel smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. "Because one day, someone's going to sit across from you and think their life is over. And you're going to be the one who shows them it's just beginning." I held the letter against my chest like it was sacred. I had a home. I had a purpose. And for the first time in my life, I had a future. It was weeks after I started the job when the pieces finally began to fall into place. I had settled into my new role at the nonprofit, learning the intake process, sitting with women who were raw and scared, guiding them the way I wished someone had guided me. Every time I looked across the desk and saw a mother clutching her child, every time I heard someone say, "I don't know how we ended up here," I would gently smile and say, "I do, and you're not alone." But there was still something about Daniel that stayed just out of reach. He was kind, composed, generous, but there was a heaviness behind his eyes, something carefully hidden beneath the tailored suits and quiet strength. He never talked about his past. He never stayed too long in conversations that brushed against grief or family. And though he always showed up for others, he never really let anyone show up for him. One night, after a long day of helping a woman escape an abusive partner and place her kids in emergency housing, I found myself sitting outside the nonprofit building, emotionally drained. Daniel walked out and sat beside me on the steps without a word. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sunset bleed into the city skyline. "You remind me of her," he said suddenly. I turned, surprised. "Who?" He looked down at his hands. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "My wife." I waited. Not pressing, just listening. He told me that 10 years ago, he and his wife were living in a small apartment, barely getting by. He was working nights, trying to launch a tech startup, and she was everything, his compass, his calm, his reason. One winter night, while he was out pitching investors, their apartment caught fire due to faulty wiring. She didn't make it out. He paused. His voice cracked. "I was too late. I was chasing a dream, and she died alone." I didn't breathe. I lost my faith that night. He continued. "I lost her, and I lost myself. I spent the next 2 years just surviving. Then one day, someone sat down beside me, just like I sat beside you. They said, 'You're still here. That must mean you still have something to do.'" He turned to me then, his eyes full, not with tears, but with something more haunting. I built everything after that moment, but I never found peace. Not until I saw you, sitting on that bench, holding on by a thread. Something in your eyes. It was the same look I had in the mirror for years. I wasn't saving you. I was saving the part of me I thought was gone. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was tight and my heart felt too full to speak. It wasn't romance between us. It never had been. What grew was something quieter, deeper. A connection not of desire, but of recognition. Two people scarred by fire, his literal, mine emotional, meeting in the ashes and choosing to build again. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We just sat there in silence as the streetlights flickered on around us. Two broken souls, two stories scarred by flame. And somehow together, we had become something whole. 1 year later, I stood in front of a room full of women who looked just like I once did, tired, scared, and holding on by a thread. Except this time, I wasn't one of them. I was leading them. I used to think the fire was the end of my story, but now I know it was the beginning. It didn't destroy me. It stripped away everything I wasn't so I could finally see who I was meant to be. The broken mother, the forgotten woman, the desperate soul in the backseat of a car. That was me. But so was the fighter, the builder, the voice for the next woman, gasping in silence. When a local reporter heard about Phoenix Rising and shared my story, it went viral. Millions of people watched, shared, cried. Strangers sent letters, churches called to help. Mothers wrote to say, I thought I was alone. But the most important message was this: God didn't abandon me. He sent someone. And now, I get to be that someone. Because miracles don't always look like lightning from the sky. Sometimes, they look like a stranger on a bench. And they start with the quiet belief that you're not forgotten. Not now. Not ever. I had gone from sleeping in a car with my daughter to mentoring women in shelters, guiding them through job interviews, helping them rebuild shattered lives, brick by brick. What once felt impossible had become my calling. And when Daniel's nonprofit offered to fund a new pilot project, I knew exactly what it had to be. I called it Phoenix Rising, a transitional home for single mothers escaping crisis. A place not just to survive, but to heal. To breathe, to believe again. The first time I opened the door to that small renovated building, I wept. Because I knew what it meant. Not just for me, but for the next woman who walked through it with nothing but fear and a child in her arms. Every room was built with intention. A crib beside every bed. Soft lights, a chair for prayer, shelves of donated books, warm meals ready, staff trained not in charity but compassion. I had become the miracle I once begged for. And every time someone asks how I did it, I smile and say, because someone saw me when I was invisible, and now I see you.